Europe's nobility gathered to prevent a war, then the floor vanished beneath them. Within seconds, knights and lords were drowning in human waste. This was not an execution or a battlefield massacre. It was a political meeting, swallowed by a medieval latrine. By the end, you'll know why so many powerful men were packed into that room, what actually caused the collapse, and how one of medieval Europe's most important rulers survived, while dozens beneath him disappeared. It is July 1184, and you are inside the fortified walls of a prosperous city in the Holy Roman Empire. The empire is not one country. It is a restless patchwork of duchies, bishoprics, counties, and free cities. Authority flows through personal loyalty, inherited privilege, marriage, money, and force. Two powerful figures are trapped in a bitter dispute, Louis III, Landgrave of Thuringia, and Conrad of Wittelsbach, Archbishop of Mainz. Their conflict has dragged on for years. Neither man can simply surrender without losing status, allies, and influence. So Henry VI, King of the Romans and son of Emperor Frederick Barbarossa, calls them together. Henry is still young, but he stands at the center of European power. His task is to force a settlement before rivalry becomes open warfare. The gathering takes place in rooms belonging to a church complex. Nobles, knights, officials, and clerics crowd inside to witness the negotiations. And that detail matters. Medieval political power had to be seen. A settlement made privately could be denied. A settlement witnessed by the elite became reality. So more men entered the chamber. Then more. Heavy bodies, armor, benches, chests, and ceremonial clothing pressed down upon an aging wooden floor. Beneath them was not solid earth. It was an open space above a latrine cesspit. To understand what happened next, forget the clean castle interiors built by movies. A medieval latrine could be a shaft, chute, or enclosed pit designed to collect waste below a building. In a large religious or residential complex, that meant years of filth accumulating beneath occupied rooms. The chamber's wooden flooring depended on beams weakened by age, moisture, insects, poor maintenance, or all four. No surviving investigation tells us exactly which beam failed first. But the basic mechanism is brutally clear. The room was overcrowded. The supporting structure gave way. And gravity finished the argument. The floor collapsed beneath the assembly. Men, furniture, and broken timbers crashed through the level below. That lower floor failed as well, sending victims into the cesspit underneath. Imagine the confusion. You have no electric light. Dust smothers the torches. Beams strike bodies in the dark. Men in heavy clothing fall on top of one another. Those who survive the impact land in deep human waste, trapped beneath wreckage and other victims. This is where the story becomes almost unbelievable. Some sources say roughly 60 people died. Later accounts claim the number was higher. Medieval chronicles do not give us a modern casualty report, and their details vary. But they agree on the central horror. A gathering of elites collapsed into the latrine below. This was not a random crowd. Among the dead were counts, lords, knights, and court officials, men whose names carried land, military obligations, and family power. Chronicles identify nobles such as Count Gosmer of Ziegenhain, Count Friedrich of Abenberg, and Burgrave Friedrich of Kirchberg among those lost. Some were killed by the fall. Some may have been crushed by timber and bodies. Others, according to chroniclers, suffocated or drowned in the cesspit. And here is the contradiction. These men belonged to a warrior aristocracy. They had survived campaigns, sieges, feuds, and the permanent violence of medieval politics. Their clothing displayed rank. Their weapons announced authority. Their castles were designed to resist armies. None of it mattered in that darkness. Armor and heavy fabric may have made escape harder. Status could not create space to breathe. Wealth could not make broken beams move. The social order above had been rigid and carefully displayed. Below the floor, it collapsed into a struggle for air. The disaster instantly disrupted networks of inheritance and allegiance. Every dead noble left behind property, obligations, rivals, and heirs. One collapsing room could alter marriages, claims, and local balances of power for years. But before you learn how the most important men survived, you need to understand something even stranger. The disaster may have spared them because medieval buildings treated rank as architecture. The king did not stand wherever space happened to remain. Henry occupied a place appropriate to his rank, probably a stone window recess or elevated architectural seat built into the masonry. When the wooden floor failed, that stone support held. Picture the room breaking apart around you. The central floor drops. Men vanish. Furniture slides toward the opening. Dust fills the chamber. But a small section attached to the stone wall remains suspended above the pit. Henry survives. The Archbishop of Mainz and the Landgrave of Thuringia also escape, though accounts differ on precisely where each man stood and how each was rescued. The political leaders whose dispute created the gathering lived. Many of the witnesses summoned around them did not. That is the cruel geometry of the disaster. Rank placed certain men near stronger walls, elevated seats, or window recesses. Those positions were ceremonial, but when the chamber collapsed, ceremony became protection. Rescuers eventually pulled survivors from the wreckage. Henry was reportedly brought down using ladders. Below him lay a scene so degrading that chroniclers struggled to describe it without moral judgment. Because medieval writers rarely treated catastrophe as meaningless. A disaster this grotesque demanded an explanation. And human waste offered them a symbol too powerful to ignore. Chroniclers recorded the event as more than structural failure. To them, catastrophe could expose pride, punish disorder, or remind the powerful that earthly rank was temporary. You can see why. The elite had gathered to settle a feud, a contest driven by jurisdiction, prestige, and control. Then nobles who lived above ordinary people were physically dropped into the empire's accumulated filth. It reads like an invented parable. Yet multiple medieval sources preserve versions of the event. Historians generally accept that a deadly floor collapse occurred during the royal assembly at Erfurt in 1184, even if the exact death toll and individual details remain uncertain. And this is the main reveal. The Erfurt Latrine disaster was not simply bizarre bad luck. It was a collision between medieval politics and medieval infrastructure. The need for a public display of authority packed the chamber. Social hierarchy determined where people stood. Aging construction placed them over a cesspit. When the building failed, those forces acted together. Politics created the crowd. Architecture created the trap. And status helped decide who escaped. The event sounds absurd only because history is often cleaned before you receive it. The ceremonies survive in paintings. The laws survive in documents. The castles survive as romantic ruins. The smell, panic, and physical vulnerability are erased. Zoom out, and Erfurt exposes something larger about the medieval world. Power was personal, physical, and dangerously concentrated. A single room might contain the officials who govern entire regions. There were no modern safety codes, occupancy limits, structural inspections, or emergency services waiting outside. And information was fragile. What you know comes through chroniclers writing with limited access, political loyalties, religious assumptions, and a taste for memorable details. Their accounts preserve the disaster, but they also shape it. That means you should resist the neatest version of the story. We cannot reconstruct every position in the chamber or prove the exact cause of death for every victim. What remains certain is enough. A royal peace meeting took place. A heavily occupied wooden structure collapsed. Numerous members of the nobility fell into a latrine pit. Henry VI survived, and the grotesque circumstances ensured the event was remembered for more than 8 centuries. Not because it was merely disgusting, but because it reduced an entire political order to bodies fighting beneath broken floorboards. The negotiations at Erfurt were meant to demonstrate control. Instead, the building exposed how thin that control really was. Above the floor stood kings, bishops, counts, and knights arranged by rank. Then the floor broke. And the titles meant nothing. The Erfurt latrine disaster endures because it feels like history making a savage joke at the expense of the powerful. But beneath the dark humor is a real catastrophe, one created by overcrowding, decaying infrastructure, and a political culture that needed authority performed in public. You were supposed to see nobility govern Europe. Instead, you saw the ground swallow them. If this broke your brain a little, subscribe. We drop one of these every week. Next time, Lake Nyo suffocated entire villages without warning. The night an invisible cloud rolled downhill and erased life without fire, flood, or sound.